All right, let me go back to my slide deck. And let's get into movement 3. Couple things. Oh, wow, that moved all my windows around. Okay, got to move you guys down because I got to get a hold of that tab. All right. So a couple reminders from last night, because I just want to make sure this is on this recording as well. Just review from Monday. We're meeting Mondays at 7 p.m., Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. And I know that's really confusing. It won't be when we're meeting in person, I know, because then they'll be in different categories in our brains. But for right now, I'm going to repeat it a lot. Please have grace with me. And then I wanted to make the point, particularly after Amy was so sick on the call last night, and I'm hoping she's feeling better today. If you have any symptoms, do not come to rehearsal. Even if you think they're allergy symptoms, even if whatever, if you have any symptoms, which is different than the rule from before, but that's the right thing to do. So I didn't say that overtly last night. I wanted to make sure I said it today. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do actually is go through the Google Classroom. And oops. All right, so I'm just going to run through this really quickly because I think most of you get it, but just so that it's on the video somewhere. This is our Google Classroom. When you land on it, you'll land on the stream, which is just like our Facebook news feed. The thing to remember about that is that the more recent stuff will be on top. The older stuff will stay in the bottom, however. Amber and I will do our best to keep the Zoom link always pinned to the top. All the stuff you're going to be using is here. And this is how I have it organized now. I think this makes the most sense for now, but we'll see. Feel free to give me feedback. So their general stuff will be on the top, like print your copy of the score. And after the first couple of weeks, I'll change that to be, this is the score, so that you know that as a resource. Then there's just these folders, basically. So all the Zoom meeting recordings will be here. They'll be in reverse chronological order because as I add things, the freshest stuff is on the top. But they'll be clearly labeled. And then I think what I'm going to do is all the resources related to each movement, I'm going to bucket in one folder. So we're working on movement 3. So now there's stuff in movement 3. And the resources will just add as I put together marks. Like in this one, I don't know, the breathing kind of takes care of itself. I didn't find very many breath marks in my score. So in other movements, there will be more breath marks. And so I may upload a document there that's like, hey, here are your breath marks, so you have them in a handy place. It'll all be organized by movement. And any recordings that we do once we're meeting in person, like I'm realizing too, this is another whole skill set I have now. Once we're meeting in person, we can record those rehearsals. I did that before and always came right home and listened to them. But now I think I have the skills to easily excerpt parts. And so if I'm going to give feedback on like, hey, I love what we did in movement 1 here. Can we like do a little bit more of that? I'll be able to drop that clip in there and that'll be in that. So that's how this is organized. Erin.
We're gonna maybe record them so that people that can't be there can watch them.
That's a good question. I wasn't thinking about video recording. I was thinking about audio recording. I think here's the grace we have right now, again, because it's such a long runway. For the next 5 to 6 weeks, wouldn't be that critical. Like it would be, it'd be hard because you're walking into a group that's already got some momentum or whatever, but that also makes it easier to like jump in and catch up. So that balance would be there. If we got to 4 or 5 weeks and we felt like we were still wanting to recruit and welcome, then yeah, I would definitely start video. I start planning rehearsals around making sure there was a tutorial set and recording those.
I'm willing to record, but if we can't be there because of COVID symptoms or we're sick or something.
That's what I have been thinking about that. What I've also been thinking about is live streaming them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we could also do. So yeah, so we're all on the same page. There'll be more stuff to figure out week by week, but keep the feedback coming because it'll help me prioritize too. Okay, so that's the Google Classroom. There are 2 other sections. People, so if you need to email somebody or whatever, you can just click on their name and send them an email directly through the classroom. And grades, this will be interesting to see how this shows up. So nothing's being graded, but in the past, in classes like this, it's been really helpful for people to see like, what have I gotten done, what I haven't gotten done. And so I'm going to kind of leave that up halfway and see what it does, but you can pay attention to it or not, you know, or whatever. So, but that's the Google Classroom. So, and boy, it's really handy to have one place. So all your rehearsal tracks for that movement will be under the movement. Anything, you know, whatever. So in fact, I had to read down the rehearsal tracks from the cloud because iCloud automatically archived them. And so I'll have those up tomorrow because they're currently downloading in the background. Okay, so that's the background there. All right. We are going to spend some time visiting with Movement 3 tonight, refugees. I was going to get into Movement 1 tonight, but no, I'm going to save it for next Monday and pair it with Movement 5 and the tail end of Movement 3. So Movement 3 is the pivotal movement of the piece. And this was the first thing that I was like, I want to set this to music. This was the first poetry. This was the first thing. And so this is the poem. And I'm going to start there. They have no need of our help. So do not tell me these haggard faces could belong to you or me, should life have dealt a different hand. We need to see them for who they really are, chancers and scroungers, layabouts and loungers, with bombs up their sleeves, cutthroats and thieves. They are not welcome here. We should make them go back to where they came from. They cannot share our food, share our homes, share our countries. Instead, let us build a wall to keep them out. It is not okay to say these people are people just like us. A place should only belong to those who are born there. Do not be so stupid to think the world can be looked at another way. And then you read the same thing from bottom to top, which sounds like this. The world can be looked at another way. Do not be so stupid to think that a place should only belong to those who are born there. These are people just like us. It is not okay to say build a wall to keep them out. Instead, let us share our countries, share our homes, share our food. They cannot go back to where they came from. We should make them welcome here. They are not cutthroats and thieves with bombs up their sleeves, layabouts and loungers, chancers and scroungers. We need to see them for who they really are. Should life have dealt a different hand, these haggard faces could belong to you or me. So do not tell me they have no need of our help. Is that not just, I mean, just the architecture of it alone in terms of, and how it, you know, and what I love about the reaction to singing this here was people post-concert really referring to this and feeling like all of their, because there's, this puts things monolithically, but none of us are monolithic, right? So we all have sort of points of view and feelings that go with both sides of this poem. And I love that going both ways is so inclusive for both of that, because that's what we are supposed to be doing as a choir. And we represent in that spectrum all the points of view. So I love that. I love the way John set this as well. So I wanted you to have that instruction first, particularly for new people, because you hear it differently, knowing that's what's happening and knowing that that's where the music is going to want to reflect. So we're just going to take a minute and do a listen through of the movement. Maybe. I love this part. Okay, so I know it brings back memories, doesn't it? So you can hear there's a lot going on there. So before I start talking about it, particularly those of you who are new to it, what do you hear in all of that? Janine, what do you hear in that?
I was extremely moving, and I'm glad that I finally saw that. I mean, I listened to the track earlier, couldn't understand the words, and listening now, my God,
It's a full roller coaster.
it is a roller coaster. It's I'm speechless. Call on someone else.
And it's very, very fun to see.
Incredible.
That's the thing too. So you're gonna see all the I want to preface, I'm gonna pull back all the complexity tonight, and it could be overwhelming. Trust me, it's really fun to sing. I'm just giving you some tools to use as handholds as we go forward. Don't let it overwhelm you. Maureen, you heard it live, so you've heard this before. What do you hear in this? I mean, it doesn't sound like one movement. It sounds like a whole opera crammed into one movement.
I hear a lot of discord.
Mm-hmm. There's
A lot of
sevens and ninths. Yep.
a lot of mixed emotions.
That's, again, I love it. I love the way he set this. I just love it. And Farron, what does it sound like to you?
Yeah, I was giving it a listen a bit before the meeting, playing some of the notes on my piano, and then realizing my printer doesn't print double-sided and being very sad. But
Yes.
just the whole tone of the piece, and especially the way that it changes in the middle, like you can really feel the tone shift in there. And well, musically, I really like the tension that's in a lot of the harmonies there, and the way it resolves. It just sounds really good to my ears, and I'm very excited to sing it.
Yeah, it's really, and what I love too is that there's intense beauty on both sides. It's not like one half is ugly and the other half is pretty at all or whatever. There are gorgeous moments on every side. There's gorgeous harmonies and there's tension on both sides. Like I just hear more, and this is the thing about great music. The more you hear it, the more you discover in it. And like I didn't think I could know this piece any better. And yet here, like there's all this stuff that, you know, again, I was white knuckling my way through that term, but you know, that Carnegie Hall term. But now, like just having had it set and mature, I'm very excited about getting back into it. So that said, so some things I want to talk about, and then I'm going to go into the score and talk about some of the things that make it hard to get through visually. So this is just a list of sections that I'm including in the slide deck, because I'll also post the slide deck in the Google Classroom as well, because I'm going to refer back to these sections in the coming weeks. So I want to make a note of really encouraging passive learning, like really, you know, this is a choir where I love working with people who don't read music. It's really great. Listen to it a lot. Listen to a lot. In fact, your assignment for this week is kind of a listening and practice along, not singing with it, but practicing something else with it while you're listening to it. And I'll talk about that at the end. So a couple things I also want to preface with. Written music encodes a lot of information, a lot more than written language. Because think about it, written language is just one part of this score we're looking at. It's not just pitches, it's how those pitches are connected. It's the shortness and the length of those pitches in terms of the rhythm. It's how they get loud, how they get soft, how they get accented, how they get leaned into, how they get stretched, how they get sped up. So John's very, very good at putting a lot of those editing marks in, but it's going to look like a bunch of crazy bugs like jumping around the page for a little bit. It will get clearer over time. Don't let that dissuade you. Really don't let that dissuade you. All right, so we have a couple of other challenges that I want to explain before I go to the next part. One is this, particularly the front half of this piece, is all in mixed meter. And what I mean by that is, normally stuff is in a generally pretty static meter, particularly pop music. It's normally in 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that may speed up or slow down throughout the song, but it just stays in that 4 count, that repeating 4 count. Each one of those repeating 4 counts is called a measure in printed music, and there's always the same amount of beats in the measure, unless there's a different time signature at the beginning of that measure, which looks like a fraction. It's not a fraction, but it looks like a fraction there. And if they show up in midstream while you're singing something, that means they're changing how many beats are supposed to be in that measure. And so it's one of many, many ways to create a sense of rocking or jazzy stress. Like if you think of like the Mission Impossible theme, dum dum ba dum bum bum ba dum dum bum ba dum. That's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2. It's an irregular meter. It's a complex meter. So every one of those measures would have a 1 2 3, a 1 2 3, and a 1 2 and a 1 2 in them. So there'd be 10 eighths in it, which sounds really weird, but when you realize it's just a way of sort of creating that sort of uneven tense and stress and tension and playing with it with the words, it's much simpler. Another way to do that, rather than sort of going with an irregular meter that normally cuts apart or repeats one of the extra 3s or something, one way to do it is just notate it out. And that you see most often when you're trying to through compose, which means you're trying to make the melody match the way this would be spoken. And so the rhythm, rather than the words flattening out to the rhythm the way it does like in a hymn, where it's the same different words to the same music again and again. This is the opposite, where the words are the anchor and the music goes to it, and the music is custom for every single clause in every single phrase. So the way John deals with this is with a lot of mixed meter, particularly when we are supposed to be saying something with some attitude. And so most of tonight, I'm going to be talking about how we can start practicing not being afraid of those mixed meters. But we also have triplets, which I'll explain when we see them, a lot of accents and tenutos, which I want to do more with this time around. We have a note called NB that I want to make sure you guys know about. And then I want to explain what's going on page 6. So let me change my, come back to that. Oh, I got to move you again. All right, so here is the score. I'm going to blow that up. All right, so right off the bat, you can see the meter that we're in right here is 3/4. And it stays that, but there's an additional challenge to this entrance. Anybody have any idea what it is? Just looking at it?
Eighth rest.
Yeah, we come in on the end of the beat. So the way we would count this is not just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and, which means that we come in on the and of the first beat, the and of 1 there. And so now the other complex thing about this, which actually makes this entrance much easier, is that this is an attacca entrance, the way we'll be performing it, which means movement will be finishing singing the last note of the previous movement, like right here. That 8th note will be our breath, and we go right forward. So that makes it a bit easier, but I'm pointing these out visually so you understand what they are. So I want you to also pay attention to the fact that in modern scoring and notation, thank goodness, everything is always laid out proportionally, rhythmically. So since we have a 3/4 measure here in the first measure, if you visualize this in 3 columns, the beats are equally, and the subdivisions of the beats, the ands, are equally distributed across. So you have a visual cue of generally when in time you're supposed to sing. So what Farron was immediately catching up here was, oh, we start on a rest, so I'm not going to be singing right on the top half of beat 1. And so I'm just, these are really, and again, when we're singing, it's these visual cues that I'm using. I'm not reading the notes at that point with something I know, but I'm reminding myself, oh, this is one of those entrances where I come in on the and of 1. And it's really helpful if you just sort of see these general patterns. Don't stress about knowing what particular rest it is or whatever, but just this is part of the code of what's happening here. So we have 2 measures in 3/4, then we have a measure in 4/4. So all that means is this is the way we're counting: 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and that's it. We just switch back and forth, and the fundamental subdivision of time there, the fundamental size of the beat doesn't change. So the 1 beat in a 3/4 measure is exactly the same length in time as the 1 beat in a 4/4 measure. So those things stay very steady as well. We will probably play with them and stretch them a little bit once we have this in our bodies a bit, just because it makes it more speech-like or whatever. But in terms of learning it and understanding it, it's really bulletproof that way. So as things go on, emotions get more heated and new rhythms come in. This symbol right here in the second measure, I don't think you're seeing my cursor, maybe you are, is a triplet. And it's a big triplet. What that means is whenever you see that bracket 3 over something, what we're doing is we're fitting 3 notes or 3 percussion beats or 3, or there can be rests in there or whatever, but we're subdividing that segment of the measure into 3 equal parts, which is weird because we're in a duple meter, right? We're in 4, subdivisible by 2. So we think 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but here, what we're doing, we're only getting that 1 and 2 and then the back half of the measure is 3 and or 3 ba da da. So it's 1 and 2 and ba da da. And you'll feel that I'm not worried about, again, you understanding that intellectually. I just don't want you to be thrown by the cymbal. And so, because you'll totally feel that in the whatever. It's really fun. It's really common in rock. You'll totally get it when you feel it, and recognize sort of what's happening there. But that's the way it looks like written. So then we have a 2/4 measure here. Again, this just becomes part of the phrase when you're singing it. And we always take a breath on that. Where he's put in rests are excellent breath marks for us. We will be using all of those. Where does it get really fancy? Not quite yet. There we go. There we go. Okay, so we have 2 back-to-back triplets here. So we should make them go back to where they came from. Is the way that goes. And again, you'll hear it in the piece and it really works well, but that's the way it's written there or whatever. But then we go into a 9/8 measure. And I want to explain that. So we suddenly go into, we have all these duple meters, or all this sort of block meters where it's all about quarter notes. And then suddenly we go from 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and there, the fundamental division of time, which is half of the beat or an eighth note, it stays the same. It stays absolutely the same. But suddenly what this does is it gives us this triple meter sort of subdivision that sounds like we're dancing as we begin to say the more forceful things. They cannot share our food, share our homes, or whatever. So, and we'll practice that a ton of fun ways, using our bodies as well. So, but just that's what that means there. So, but the fundamental unit of time stays the same. Nothing's fundamentally speeding up or slowing down. It is actually a rhythmic trick to make it feel like we're going faster, even though we're not. Does that make any sense at all? Yeah. All right, then we have right here, food, homes, and countries. We have all these marks. So the dot above that eighth note, that makes it staccato. So this is the soprano note normally as an eighth note. Food, food. As a staccato, it's food. It's just tapped, like touching a hot iron, tapped. But it's also got that caret over it. That's a standard accent, which means we really hit that staccato. We hit it hard without a whole lot of nuance. Now, here on countries, that bar over the top, that's a tenuto. And that is very much like an accent, only where the accent is, we're just hitting it hard without finesse. This we're finessing. And there is a flavor difference between the two. And so I'll demonstrate that when we're together, but that's what those marks mean, because there's a lot of them coming up. Instead, let us build. If that was carrots, it'd probably be a little bit more marcato. Instead, let us build, rather than instead, let us build, where you're just sort of leaning into it and stressing it that way. So that's what those marks are. And then the last things I wanted to show you are this mark, the dotted line with NB, that means no breath. We are putting a rest, so we are stopping the phonation, but do not take a breath there. And I am always going to be stressing that when you practice your music, you practice your breaths as much as you practice the notes. This is valuable for 2 reasons. 1, it really helps you get the whole thing into your muscle memory. And 2, when you have a crazy conductor who may have extra coffee on the day of the performance, and you don't know what his tempos are going to be like, you never have to worry about your breaths when those tempo change, because they're a part of muscle memory. And it just makes you more confident overall. So here, that means don't practice not taking a breath there, stopping the phonation and then continuing it after the break. And it has a different quality. That's why it's there. We lose less momentum in the energy of the music when we do that. So then the last thing is, these are marks we don't often see in a choral score. We do see them, but more often they're in percussion scores. And that means we're not singing those notes really, we're speaking them. Although, the way we learned this is we did kind of speak them on the marked pitches. I'm not sure what we're going to do this time, but I just want to explain what that weird, odd note was. Okay, any questions about any of that? Okay. Lastly, while we're just here, I'm noticing this. You can see right here, this E flat to this F to this F sharp to this F natural. You see something like that in a score back to an F sharp, a line like that where one of the notes are pretty close to each other in the staff, and then there's a lot of these accidentals. You know, it's going to be really chromatic and sinuous. And so that's going to be one of the things I'm going to ask you just before you even really start singing into it. I mean, definitely be practicing the pitches before you really start singing it, just to pay oral attention to those notes and hear the distinctions between these half steps in particular. How high are they? How low are they? Does that mean that like you will nail them perfectly? No, but you will develop automatically without having to try more acuity with it automatically just by paying attention to it. You'll develop more acuity, and that will really aid to things when we're back in ensemble together physically. Okay. All right, so that's basically that. I'll go through more standard tempo and dynamic markings in another session. So a couple last things as you get into your score. Let me make this big. This I can't recommend this enough, and all my scores have this. I cannot recommend this enough. So given everything we talked about tonight in terms of meter, so in between each of these bar lines is a measure. In this measure there's 3 beats, in this measure there's 3 beats, in this measure because of the new time signature there's 4 beats, and then it's 3 beats again. And you can see this is how I've written in my beats visually above. And it really helps, and it will really help with the assignment this week. So this is my mark for and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 2 3, because there's no subdivision there. And that for me, you can continue with the ands. For me, this is the way it looks in my score, because that changes my gesture as a conductor. And then 1 and 2 and 3 and. So really, it's 10 minutes at most if you do it slowly to sit and write that out above each of your measures in the score, above your line. But it is really visually helpful. We have a lot of skills that we've learned by being taught to read by sight reading. So we don't sound things out anymore. If you're looking down at the text at the bottom, you're not sounding out signature. You just see signature. That's a powerful set of skills that in a lot of ways when we're singing get in our way, we have to sort of diffuse, but this is one of the ways you can really take advantage of it, because you won't have to sort of keep a mental count. Just scrolling across that page visually will do it for you, and see where your entrances line up in terms of the subliminal beat you automatically will have going as innate musicians as you all are. So any questions on how this is written? Because I'm going to show you one more example. So here, this was the section we were just at. So I am conducting in 4 here. So I wrote this as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You can leave it up to you. You could also do 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2. You can divide it into 6 or 4. Again, I'm pointing this out because this might be too much information, but I'm pointing it out because think about, like, you're going to be watching me conduct in 4. This will come out of muscle memory. This is so much fun to sing. When we get to this point, you're just on the roller coaster and your body knows what to do. So you're not going to need to be thinking that much. But what will help you most? Having it in 4, which is the way you're going to see it visually when I'm conducting it, or having it in 6. And I can make a case for either. So then there's 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then we're in the 9/8. And so then it's 1 and 2 and 3 and is the best way to think about that, because that's the way I'm going to be conducting it. And this is how I want to show you. This is how I write the and 1 and 2 and 3 and after this we have a couple of 6/8 measures, and you should write it 1 and 2 and for a 6/8 measure, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm explaining all of this because your assignment for the next week is get to know the piece this way, get to know this movement this way, write your beat subdivisions in above your part, just like I demonstrated for as at least the bare minimum measures 1 through 12, but I would do for the whole movement because I think you'll really appreciate it. Then practice listening to it and counting the beats, not singing it, but counting the beats. So get it in your, so to get it in your ear, they have no need, they have no need, they have no need of our help, is whatever. So it'd be 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So you'll flail all over the place. It's not about mastering it. So do it once or twice a day. And don't worry about whether you're getting better or not, because I guarantee doing that for a week or whatever and putting together a recording about it will put just an extra 2 or 3 brain cells on it, and suddenly you'll just read it differently. I guarantee it. Do not stress about mastering it or having to be perfect. I'm the only one's going to hear it or whatever, but it'll also give me a sense of what you're hearing and where you're hearing the downbeat. So I want you to also be proud of your mistakes. Do not try to do it perfectly. If that's what comes out, great. But I'm going to be as interested in hearing the mistakes because it's going to give me insight into how you're hearing where these downbeats fall. Does that make sense? And the downbeat is always 1, by the way. It's always in my gesture. 1 is always when my arm is going down. So that's why we call it the downbeat. And it's sort of our home base when we get lost, is you try to find the downbeat. All right, any questions? So that's my plan. Is I'm gonna actually, one more second, Aaron. I'm gonna unpack each of the movements like that so that we have a video record of it. And then I'll layer on top additional documentation in terms of breath marks, do this in the dynamic. We're gonna take more time here, yada, yada, yada. Okay? Aaron.
Measure 5.
Measure 5 is in 3.
Is it a 1 and a 2 and 3 end?
No, it's 1. We come in on the end of 1 there, just like we do in that first measure. So it's so going 2 measures before 1. They have no need of our help. 2, 3, 1. So do not let them. So you come in on the end of 1. So it's to count it. It would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. And that's what you'll hear yourself doing after a while too. As you get in your ear, suddenly your ands will be accented where you have entrances 1 and 2 and 3 and, rather than 1 and 2 and 3 and you'll begin to dance with it because this thing dances and it's crazy fun to sing. And even if you do none of this, I can't say this enough, even if you do none of this, trust me, like we didn't do any of this kind of exercise when we did the last time, and we still knew this thing to its bones and had a ball with it. So again, this is all extra tools and extra documentation. But that said, the more prepared you are when we're actually physically together, the more fun we're going to have. Yeah, Maureen.
Are we getting BandLab practice tracks for our part?
Yes, you are getting practice tracks. I can put them in BandLab. I can also put them directly into the Google Classroom because we're not recording anything on BandLab. And so you'll see that Google Classroom assignment for this week. Just record yourself whatever easiest. A voice memo on your phone, a video on your phone, even if you're not in the video, even if the phone's just sitting on the table and you're listening to the movement and counting out your numbers. And then just, you'll see when you go to the assignment, there's a Dropbox to drag and drop a file into. So whatever's easy. But if it's easier to put together a BandLab track, I can absolutely do that. And so the minimum assignment is measures 1 through 12. Extra credit if you get all the way through measure 43. So, or beyond. All right, any other questions? You'll see other notifications throughout the week as I begin to stock the classroom too with actual practice tracks. So, but for right now, the performance track is already in that section of the classwork part of your classroom. All right. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, I'm going to let you go. Yep. Going to keep it short and sweet and focused because, again, people have to watch these videos later. We don't want them to be an hour. So unless anybody wants to share anything else, I'm really excited to get started. I was anxious last night and I'm really grieving that we're not physically together today. That said, this going through the music together like this was kind of a treat. I never give myself this much time when we're actually in the rehearsal room, and I'm hoping that it's helpful. So, yes. All right, awesome. Have a great night and email me with any questions you have. Good night.
And everybody.